I wanted to start by talking about the Barclay, and you're making fun of me for how I say it. Barclay. You say it.
Barclay?
Barclay, like the dog on Sesame Street? That's how you say it?
I have
Barclay?
no idea what that
that's much easier. I was thinking it was Barclay.
Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I'd rather be wrong than say the way you're saying.
Let's have a Pims.
Pims at Barclays.
So sorry about that. It's going to be one of those shows, I think. Barclays is much easier. Barclays sponsorship of the Women's Super League. So we're going to get into that. But before we start, since we were talking to Christina Kiss of Ottawa Rapid FC, I wanted to talk to you about, because you were quoted in a number of articles, and obviously you're integral to the league getting off the ground. But what do you think of the branding thus far?
I like it. I think it's all original, and I think there's been thought put in. It's nice to see it all coming together, and each individual team having their own reasons and rationale. And yeah, I think it's powerful. And you see now the WPHL and there's stuff coming out, and I like how they weren't ready to do it last year, so they didn't. And didn't rush it, and we had time for the NSL, for the teams to really get behind it. And then I've really enjoyed the momentum and the conversation and the stories behind them.
I agree. I think that they all have kind of their own distinct look in the badges, in the colors, in the messaging even, and all of the thought and the detail that kind of went behind it. What do you think of the Victoire going back to the PWHL? Do you like it?
I got this shirt. I think, everything has a reason behind it. And that's the part that I've enjoyed. So whether I like the colors or whether I like the branding, it's irrelevant. It's someone has put a great deal of thought into it. And I think Diana and her team at the league have also done a great job, because how things have been coming out and how all the branding has to work together but still be so powerful. There's a lot that goes into that, and you don't think about. And then I just think of our incredible former teammate just trying to juggle all these things that she's had to learn about, and hired great people to help support her. It was really special to see them all sort of rolling out.
And do you think it's ironic that somebody who is 5'1", if she's lucky, is now transitioned to a role where she's Chief Growth Officer? Damn it. Officer.
I think she changed that, because otherwise I would have been tweeting that every day. But there's no way she's 5'1". Not a chance. I think we've always talked about how impressive Diana Matheson is, but she continues to just defy all expectation. And so does her team. Like the NSL is going to be a slog. It's not going to be this amazing. It's going to take work. It's going to take reimagination. They're going to get things really right, and they're going to get things really wrong, just as they're trying to do it. And she, just how much effort and work she's put in to do this, and to be almost there is just exciting to watch.
Yeah, she's a pretty impressive human being. Really, growth officer. pretty happy and lucky to know her and have her in my life. And
she texted this morning and said, "How are you? Because I just took the train the wrong way." You live in that city. What happened?
I think that will be really refreshing for people to hear.
Oh my God, it was
right, that she too makes missteps.
She knows that I would do that. I would take it for a while. I'd take it for 30 minutes before I'd be like, wait a second.
Yeah. Rian, I haven't told you this yet, but I regaled the story on, I think, yesterday's Footy Prime. And I was just putting a bow on the end of my UEFA program, the certificate in football management. Mm-hmm. So we had a group project, we had an individual project. And the last thing was, and I always hesitate to say what it is because I always get kind of lambasted for it, or there's tons of innuendo. So you'll appreciate it for my oral exam. And I had time to double check and triple check the time slot allotted to me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yep, no problem. And then the night before I checked again, and it was 11:20 Swiss time, which meant it was 5:20 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm feeling now we're Tuesday recording this. This is going to drop this broadcast episode on Wednesday morning. Yeah. So I had 2 hours of sleep on Sunday night into Monday morning when I had my test. So it went well. It's done.
Well done.
Yes.
Look, you're the mother of twins. If you aren't trained for lack of sleep, I don't know who is.
This is true, but you get out of the groove, right?
It is not very nice. I definitely have a lot of early mornings, and they don't get easier.
Yes, and you know, having to work on, you know, whatever continent you find yourself in. And actually, speaking of that, before we moved off like the branding, I wanted to say that as PWHL, like they all have new names and crests and logos and things like that, that the first year, the inaugural year shirts for all of the individual franchises are iconic.
Yeah.
You know, like people saw them as kind of piecemeal and, oh, this is like, it's a disaster. It's like an afterthought. They should have done better.
Yeah.
But I liked it because they were overt about it. They said, like, you know, we're focusing on other things. The CBA was the first thing that was started with that league, and they kind of went, sort of built the plane as they were flying it. But now, like, those shirts, people are going to show up at matches, I think, proudly kind of wearing those original jerseys, right? Almost like the original 6 with the NHL. But this
I love it. I've got mine. And do you know what I really think? The PW, it's a great so the two leagues are set up completely differently. The ownership, all of it, even like the ability to have sort of centralized regulations is different there than it is with having all these unique owners. So it's interesting, but the two have worked so collaboratively together. And I love that they've not, with the PWHL or with the NSL, rushed things. They've put their priority where they feel it should be and have been unswayed by maybe public opinion that doesn't know. They don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And I think like those step by step, just getting things done and building in the way that they think is appropriate for their own leagues has been really cool to watch. And I also love how the PWHL, you know, football, soccer is such a sport. It's almost stuck in the mud with some of the tradition. Like, it's hard to change, but hockey in Canada is equally the same, especially from Montreal, you know, sorry, but you know, it's one of these cultures that no one's ever happy in hockey in Montreal or in Canada. And then the bravery to just change some of the rules and regulations in the women's game because they thought it was the right thing to do. And the great conversation that started around that's now potentially being brought into the men's game in the future. I think like these are things that the women's game just look at and not get scared by people that are stuck in traditions that need to change.
Yeah. And it's not, I don't think it's gimmicky either, because that would be, I think some people who are looking for the negative would say that it is. It's innovative, looking to do something different. And I think making a really solid argument for the fact that whether it's women's hockey versus men's hockey or women's football versus men's football, it's the same sport, but it's a different game, isn't it, when you're watching it being played?
I think it is. I think that's a weirdly controversial thing to say. I think there are people that prefer watching women's soccer, watching men's soccer, football. I mean, I enjoy both for different reasons. I think you see a lot in the women's game that you don't always see in the men's game just because of the speed and athleticism of these players. But they are different. The ability to hit a cross-field ball, for example, on the men's game means that your formation, your structures, how you drop, how tight you get is different than the women's game, where a couple women can actually hit that ball, but we know about them. And you sort of
you see them coming.
Even like as a coach, just speaking in the men's game, frequently they push players inside, they funnel them into the numbers, and you know, it's an interesting thing to look at. Some teams do it on the women's side, but the reality is majority of the goals are scored through the middle in the women's game, so not from the outside. And because we're not able to get the power behind the cross in the same way as the men's game, it's a less of a percentage ball than coming through the middle. So we force to the outside. So there's just different tactical things that you do on the women's side. But equally, I've coached men's teams occasionally, and you know, we try inside, outside. They're all different things to play with, but there's differences for sure.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, I think, approach to the game, and I think a way that you can speak to the public, to your potential fan, to those stakeholders that are so important to the growth of the game. And then on that note, Barclays, which is much easier to say than Barclays. Barclays sponsorship of the Women's Super League. So again, I think England leading the way when you look at women's professional leagues or domestic professional leagues. So they've agreed to a new 3-year sponsorship deal with Barclays. It's a £45 million deal that will see them double their investment in the women's game. And actually, it used to be, it was owned by Newco, and then now it's the Women's Professional Leagues Limited, WPLL, which doesn't really roll off the tongue. But there was a few years ago rumors that the Premier League was going to take over the WSL, and then now they sort of divested themselves of the FA, which is, I think, is good, again, for the growth of the women's game. A lot of the domestic pro leagues depend on their national association for sustainability, or just to make sure that they can survive. So I think that it's a great deal. But when you look at it, their contributions also extend to the Football Association. So Barclays not only sponsoring the Women's Super League, but they're also giving money to the Football Association and the grassroots, because they're building, I think, programs in schools.
Yeah.
So in terms of Canada, if we look at it through our lens, are we at the same level of commitment? Like, we look at the NSL, the founding partners are Canadian Tire, Air Canada, CIBC, and DoorDash. Fabulous founding partners, I think, off on the right foot there. But even if that sponsorship is there for the new league, is there still a chasm, like this massive gulf, because there's a lack of investment on the federation side, that might be starting off and doing things the right way in terms of a domestic pro league, which is late to the game. But then from a federation standpoint, and it's kind of upholding the grassroots, that's still lacking?
Yeah, I mean, partially outside of my wheelhouse here, so I would just say this is all opinion based. I think Barclays,
Rian, all of this is opinion based. I am not an expert on this. Well, I want to hear your opinion. That's why you're here.
I mean, I'm very excited for what's happening in the WSL. I think the game, the growth, the importance of the women's success in the Euros, and then the finals and the World Cup, and what it's done for the game over there, and how quickly it's happened. Like, you and I both grew up playing England, and they were so bad, only in that they just were not organized. They weren't professionalized. We were ahead of them. And then they sort of realized this population, and still football, soccer is not common, and as in it's not as accessible as it is in North America. So if they continue to get their ducks in a row, I think England will continue to be a powerhouse for a long time. What I really am happy about is the investment in grassroots. I think on the men's side, in the Premiership, you see teams that represent the UK in terms of nationalities, color, religion. I think that when you look at London, when you look at Birmingham, when you look at these cities, it's a very multicultural country. And I don't think that has been the reality on the women's game. I think it's a privileged game still for the women, because it costs so much, and you've got to have parents, you've got time to drive you. There's not really women's clubs in the cities or academies like they've done on the men's side to really harness all different types of people coming from different sort of economic backgrounds. And so when I look at that money coming in, I'm really pleased to hear
it's not happening where you are. Yeah.
Well, I'm in the US. So it's just a reality that the women's game does need to have access to the lower income areas of the country to really make the game that we love, accessible to all. And then I look at that, and I look at Canada, and I'm thinking, like, we're not the US, we're not the UK. We have our realities financially. I think that sports coverage in our country is a problem for all sports, other than potentially hockey. And even then, there's always a fight on, like, who's airing it, so we don't get those sort of huge financial windfalls like a Barclays, and we won't. I really can't see that happening for a long time. Instead, we've got companies that have really stepped up to the plate in the inaugural year when there's nothing to back, and really showing their commitment. And that is what Canada is about. And it's how we continue to bring in these Canadian companies, and how we can up that investment in a way to help prop up the teams that maybe need more support than others. So socialist, such a Canadian answer. But I do think, like, that is what the big money's done in those leagues in the UK or in the US. You get these big monies, so you can sort of prop up the teams that are struggling a bit. We need to be able to do that for the NSL, especially the first few years, where we just don't know. We don't know where we're going to need to, like, quickly put some money to help support an area. But I do think we very quickly we'll need to look at academies and how we get into our city centers, because like I said, that is something that I think the investment will really help with in the UK. And we're not there yet in Canada, but it's also something I don't want us to forget about.
And I know when England women's national team won the Euros, they penned a letter to the government to ensure that there was football in schools. And now that's happened. Like, they're well ahead on where the FA's women's soccer, women's football strategy was. So that's going to start to shift with like the way that the starting 11 looks in photos, the way that that roster looks. It will become more diverse. That's a really important piece. And so is the fact that the games were highly visible. There were a lot of eyeballs on this team via the FA player. They've removed it for this year and games will be on YouTube, but unfortunately Canadians are geo-blocked.
So frustrating. Right? I tried.
Yes.
Oh gosh.
So, I mean, maybe speak about that, or like a little bit about the frustration, but with the NSL's deal with TSN, with Radcan and RDS, and then also I think broadcasting on YouTube. Am I speaking out of turn?
I'm not actually sure.
I'm not sure either, but at least with those, like it's a deal with a bunch of different linear broadcasters.
Yeah.
The eyeballs in the first year and making it accessible, much the way the PWHL was, where they would just hit massive numbers for games that were just available to people to take in, was huge in ensuring that there was that positive cycle. Yes, there's the investment, but then you also get the support with the eyeballs, and that funnels it back in and it keeps kind of turning in the right direction.
Yeah, you're going to get me on my treadmill here, which is that our league in Canada is going to take a second, right? We're starting. I'm so excited. We just need to get it going. And we look at our youth sport teams. We look at the clubs that we've got around our country. We look at our registration. Are we the second highest registration sport in the world, or like soccer here in Canada? And I'm like, we got to give these women somewhere to play. And there's something around, our top players, as in the national team players. Maybe some of them will be looking at the NSL, but really this is going to be a league that we start that gives a platform for our women to play. And there's going to be gems that come out of this league in year one. I'm so clear on that. I think the respect that we haven't been given to our Canadian programming, because it's not the NCAA, all of a sudden you'll be like, where was this player? She didn't want to go to the US. So she's always been there, but you haven't respected. Like, this is what the league is about. And that's where you look at the funding, and usually funding goes the wrong way. It usually goes like down, like top down. Mm-hmm. And we're saying like this league, yes, it's going to be a top professional league, but actually we're going to bring up our game. The grassroots will have somewhere to play, these women to show themselves. And that's what's important to me, is that we have that in Canada. And actually that is different than the model in the UK and in the US. And it has to be. That's when you talk about innovation, what can we do differently? It's always nice to have a big marketable star. Of course, we want that, but actually that's probably, we'll have our stars, but it's something that will build it. For me, it's more, how are you putting together your teams? Each of these teams across Canada, what are you attempting to do? Are you attempting to create top athletic team and looking at all the players across our youth sports system, supplemented by players coming in from Europe or maybe from the US? What are you going to do? And I find that really interesting, like the technical directors of these teams. I'd love to see their planning for this, because it is probably the most exciting thing for me. Like, what standards or what criteria are you going to use? And I think that'll be fun for the fans, like to be part of it from the very beginning. Like, what is the DNA of your team?
I think also in the way that it evolves, right? Yes. So you're going to have a plan in year one, based on the pieces that or the pieces that you might anticipate getting, whether it's from local talent, Canadian talent, or your internationals and what they're going to lend, or because of the league starting this year, and then players who are tied up in contracts and might envision coming to the NSL eventually, and how that might, not upset the apple cart, but might sort of cause you to divert a little bit from your path and what your original goal was. But how much I wanted to ask you about this and your work on the pathway before you joined Wales as their manager. how important is that academy piece? Because it's not mandated, but how important is that not only for the individual franchises, the league, but also for the growth of the women's game in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely am a huge proponent, and you know that. Yeah, like I think we look at our base of players and all these players registered, and how do we continue to widen that base and give opportunity? And by academies, I think there's this thing like young people have to go into the academies, and if they got a chance, like right now in Canada, Rex, Next, National Develop, whatever you're calling these centers. Right now, if you're not in those centers, it's really hard to be seen for any youth team. But if we look at these academies as teams that are in different leagues playing each other, then that whole league becomes a scouting network. You're constantly looking around at talent and supporting it and potentially giving another avenue to a player who's maybe in opposition for your academy team. And all of a sudden they're now on the radar and they could be signed directly to the senior. They don't have to go through the academy. Mm-hmm. So I just think it's really important that we create as many pathways as possible and as many nets as possible. I'll say that there is a false belief that we need to recruit talent from abroad. And that I see across the world. It drives me bananas that so US is a great example. So I played in the NWSL in the very first years, and, you know, Canada and Mexico, our federations help support the league. So every team had to have like mandated Mexicans and Canadians. And for the most part, all of us.
I won't take that sentence out of context. Don't worry.
Thank you. that we just sat on the bench. Majority of us sat because we weren't from Brazil and we weren't from England and yeah, some of us weren't good enough to be playing. I'm not saying that, but there's something about not thinking that was the exciting country to sign someone from. And I think then you look at our Canadian league, don't make the same mistake that you've got to bring into, oh, this is an Australian, this is someone who's coming from Scotland, or they could be great. They supplement the team, but believe in what you have in front of you and give it opportunity. I truly believe we'll be having this conversation at the end of next year, and we'll be talking 2-3 names that have come out of nowhere, air quotes for those that can't see, because they've been there the whole time, but we've never given them opportunity to shine. And it's the same thing. Like, don't fall into the same trap as so many leagues that are like, we have to buy the talent. You definitely need to bring in experience sometimes, but do it in an intelligent way. Like I've had so many amazing conversations. If you are on the East Coast, is it almost more interesting to go look at Uruguay, you know, or Argentina or Brazil, who are in the same time zone as you? And that opens up a whole market. If you're going to bring in 2 players, instead of going 6 hours to Central Europe, 5 hours, then look down, you know.
And listener, if you're not watching this on YouTube, Rian's drawing longitudinal lines from the East Coast down to Uruguay.
think outside of the box. Yeah. I was talking about the PWHL. I think this is such an opportunity for Canadians to make it a Canadian league and to not get caught up in how things have always been. I find that the most ridiculous argument, and it continues to be thrown at me and to be thrown at a lot of women, I have to say, because we are sort of following in the men's footsteps in some ways, right? They've been going a lot longer than us. And so we have to try and do what they've done. That's not what I mean. When I say academies, I don't mean let's follow or copy what they're doing in the MLS. I'm like, let's make this what we want it to be. And to be brave enough to do that. But I don't work there anymore. So
let me ask you this. I want you to stay on this because it's really interesting to me. Do you think that the league has a chance, even in the first year, we want it to be a league by Canadians for Canadians, there would be 7 internationals. So I love the word that you use, which is supplement. So you supplement the Canadian talent that you hopefully, which is the majority of your roster. But do you think that this league, like what it ends up doing, maybe not by year 1, but maybe by year 5, is changing the perception of these players, the Canadian players, not worldwide, but for the people who are doing the scouting and the coaching and on the technical side in Canada, so that the Canadian players are valued the way that they deserve to be valued?
Yeah, absolutely. You see that all the time when you bring in like a great talent to leagues like the WSL or the NWSL, and you see them alongside homegrown talent. And you're like, well, like this is very similar. You know, seven internationals. I don't think I'm saying something new. It's not something I particularly wanted, but it is something that the ownership felt they needed to be as flexible as possible in the first few years, which I think is great and great rationale. But I think that it's almost like a fear of what's right in front of you and not trusting it. And so it's a safety blanket of having like, okay, we can get foreign talent in. Absolutely, we want some foreign talent. That, don't get me wrong. Like you just said, I love the word supplement. Like, how do we support our Canadian talent, give them the leadership, give them some experience, because we haven't had a league before. But absolutely get behind what we have, because it will surprise people for sure.
And I mean, so much other stuff here on the docket, on the rundown, but I'm ignoring it. So one last question for you about kind of that tier 2 gap in this country. And when I was working with CF Montreal, one of the glaring things to me was, first of all, was that the pay to play still existed for the young girls who were in like the Rex program, and which is now the women's program as part of the academy. So that's away now. And they're still eligible for grants and things like that from the government, but they don't have to pay the $3,000 whatever it was dollars per year to play. But they have half the competitive games than their male counterparts have, because the boys are part of MLS Next, right? Which is sort of the trickle down effect of MLS. Yeah. So what do we need to do in this country? Yes, there's a lack of infrastructure, but what about competitive circuits? Like, yes, you have to get creative, you have to get innovative. That word keeps coming back up. But is there a way that we can get there kind of quickly but efficiently, so that we can provide these players with the right environment to make strides and to grow by playing competitive games?
I think it's quickly is a challenge. Right? Systematically, we need to be like smart about what we're doing. And I agree with you. What used to be like the sport that everyone could have access to is becoming more and more of a challenge, which is why we were talking about investing in the grassroots and making sure that the game is accessible and free for everyone, as in especially in our lower income families, that the kids just need somewhere to go and play. But I think it's got to be a well thought out plan that's implemented strategically. To speed it up is to watch it collapse, because it needs to be propped up financially, and who's propping it up and how does it work, and are we actually getting players through our system? Obviously I want it tomorrow, and there's a big part of every argument I have about the importance of having a secondary league, so that they're getting games in of good quality, so that when they're moving up to higher level, they're ready. But we're not, League One is there, but it needs to be continued to invested in and give that sort of support for players to play in. But we're not there yet, and I don't think we will be for a bit. But as long as we believe in it and don't let it go, just have a system in place and just start chipping away at it. And when I say we, I'm not sure who's doing that, but we can't quit on it. That's for sure.
And going back to the grassroots and that link, obviously, with the Barclays investment, and how it's sort of at the bottom, but then also at the top of the pyramid. I think making sure that you're there and on both ends in terms of the dollars and cents is massive. But there were pictures of you making a school visit just the other day. So I mean, is that part as well of what's important to you, but also your mandate as head coach of the Welsh women's national team?
It's definitely not part of my mandate. My mandate is to absolutely be out in the community, but it's something that I've really latched onto. I think I've told this story before, but my parents brought us all back to Wales when I was young, and I'd already played soccer in Canada. I've told this story, but essentially I didn't have access to it. So a big part of what I'd like to do while I'm there is to speak to the education minister, to get out to schools, to just talk about it. I love Wales. It is a second home to me. My whole family lives there. But we're behind. And I think we're trying to do some really great things. As a federation, it's a very small country, which means we can maneuver quickly. So let's do it. And I'd say the same thing about Canada. Yes, we have a much bigger population in Canada, but we know how spread out it is. But there's advantages that we're less populated than other countries. Like, let's maneuver, let's get things done that are right. So I love the school visits. I think that they're probably, other than being on the sidelines for internationals, the next best thing is getting out with the young people and showing them how close they are to maybe playing for their country one day. I think that's exciting for Canadians or young Welsh girls.
Because there was another one, this is a few months ago now, where there was a great video that they released, and it was you running them through their paces. It was a practice, and you had them doing like fun warm-up drills, and you were absolutely in your element. I mean, you're in your element just sort of being involved in football and being on that touchline and coaching and getting to do that. But seeing you with those kids, I mean, that's the type of thing I think that's going to spur on the growth and the investment and get the eyeballs too, is to see somebody like you doing exactly what you should be doing and excelling at it. And to that end, have you met Craig Bellamy yet?
Yeah, I've met him quite a few times. He's it's nice. It's he's someone who loves his country passionately, you know, and it's great to see just the energy he and his staff are bringing. And it's always a new coach is always a sad time because someone has lost their job or has left who, you know, was great, but a new energy comes in, and then there's this big push behind it. So it's been nice, and he's wanted to be involved, and he and I are in the office quite a lot, which is, I think, nice. We have a big head office with great people that work so hard every day, and the front office is often disconnected from the technical side. And he and I share a belief that they have to work together. So he and I are often in the office, probably annoying people, but visible. And then just seeing us at work every day, and me getting to know them and what they're doing and their role. I've really enjoyed it, and I think he's done a great job since he was hired.
And how often do you steer the conversation back to Liverpool?
I don't mention it because I'm doing my pro license right now, and I've been working with Everton.
Oh, Rian. No.
They've had a rough go. So I've not been their good luck charm. But I do have a lot of material for my pro license.
That's great. Oh, so listen, we're going to end it there because Claire is not hopping on. But this is a great chat. And obviously this is a landmark deal, I think, not only for the Women's Super League, I think, but for worldwide, for women's football, and sort of setting these benchmarks for what's possible when you have the right kind of investment and backing. You can truly see where the game is headed, and that's fabulous. So what's next for the Welsh women's national team?
So at the end of October, we are going into our first playoff rounds against Slovakia. So we play away, I think in like Poznan. I'm sorry about
what was that?
No, never mind. In Slovakia. And then we're playing at home in Cardiff on the 29th. So we need to get past Slovakia in order to qualify for the final round, the second round of playoffs. And my whole family, anyone who's ever met me, potentially people that think they've met me, everyone's to this game. So it's kind of it. My 98-year-old aunt has flat out said she refuses to come, which is too bad.
I like her.
Yeah, she's honest. I'll say that.
Sounds like you, actually. That sounds like something you would say as a 98-year-old woman.
Like, no, I'm not.
It's something you said like last week. I'm sure you don't have to wait till you're 98.
Well, yeah, that's true. I said anyway. So yeah, no, it's pretty special. My mom's coming, my sister's coming, my two nephews are coming. Aunts and uncles who live there, cousins, they're all coming. It's the first game that I'll be able to coach at Cardiff City Stadium. So the last 3 games I've played have been in North Wales and Wrexham, and then 2 games in Llanelli. You're welcome.
That's you. Mm-hmm.
At Parc y Scarlet. So this will be my first game in the capital. It's pretty excited.
Amazing. So that remind me of the dates again. October 29th. Is that the first 29th. One? 25th and 29th.
Away, and then 29th at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, best of luck, friend. I know everybody who knows you and loves you in Canada will be cheering you on from afar. And cheers to Claire, wherever she is. She was mentioning what's that?
Saving lives.
Saving lives. And she mentioned a not so funny humerus dislocation or break.
Oh.
So, yeah. Swollen to the size of a watermelon.
Oh boy.
But anyway, yeah. Like, listen, subscribe. Footy Prime YouTube or any of the platforms that you listen to us on, whether it's Apple or Spotify, and leave a comment. We always love to hear from you. And till next time, I mean, the women's national team has booked a friendly in the October window against world champion Spain. So that should be a great fixture for them. And we will have news, I think, in the upcoming weeks about who the interim coach will be or if there'll be a new hire. So that should be interesting. So we'll follow that with some interest. But until then, thanks for broadening your horizons with us. And cheers for listening.